Hello everyone, welcome to Calling Glass, welcome to the pod, welcome to the club. My name is Alvaro, as always. And today in the podcast, we're talking about the new positions in the NBA, in the modern NBA. Let's see it. Hello everyone, welcome back to the pod. Today, I want to talk about a topic that is that the NBA has changed. That is true. Basketball, the positions in basketballs are not the same anymore. Point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, and center are no longer, they don't mean anything anymore. Now there is new roles, new positions that almost any player can, doesn't matter the size of the player, or it matters what they can do in the court. And I want to talk today about those positions. I will talk about three of them. And I feel like since the last 10 years, since Stephen Curry and the Warriors won their first championship, while everyone was saying that a jump shooting team couldn't win, and they did it, I feel like since then, basketball has changed, has evolved. It's always in evolution, but I feel like that was a clear cut. The Houston Rockets of James Harden and Mike D'Antoni, and they really took it to the extreme. So I will talk about them a bit, about players that play in the team. And now teams nowadays, I think it's key, pace and space. And I'm taking this from Thinking Basketball, the podcast, but it's true. Playing in a quicker pace and playing with auto space. Why? Because teams don't want to play in offense against already set defenses. So that's why playing pace matters. So you can play in transition and don't get a set defense. And with the space, is once you already have attacked, you couldn't play in transition. If you want to play against a set defense, it's much better if you can open the court and have guys create space, stretch the court to the maximum possible, to leave space for players to operate in the lane. So and I'm going to talk about certain positions. I'm going to judge players based on how well they will perform in that specific position, not how good of players they are, but how good they are at playing that specific role. And to me, it's interesting that in the NBA, in order to play in the NBA, players now, they either have to be very good, like from a roster of 15 players, they need to be the best, the second best player, maybe the third best player in order to play. Or if not, to be the best at your role. So it's better to be the worst player on a 15 player roster, but the best shooter, than to be the fourth best player. Because maybe the better shooter fits better than being the fourth best player at many things, but not being a specialist in anything. And maybe you don't fit that well with the rest of the team. So I see a lot of players that are not that good, but they do a role very well. And that's why they play. And I think that's it. And I'm going to go with the first position that I want to mention. And it's a position that actually, you could call it like the point guard, a pure point guard, but I'm going to call it primary ball handler, which, it's mainly the point guard, but it's like pure point guard. Let's call it like creating for others, because I think they are scoring point guards. I think this is the pure point guard. I'm going to call it primary ball handler. And what this means is this is the position that starts the offense independently of their size, of the player's size. Why do I say this? Because we still have the typical point guards like Chris Paul, Mike Conley, etc. Small guards with good handles, quick, that can get the ball from your basket to the offensive court. But there is other players, like Giannis, for example, that to me, he's a primary ball handler. Giannis, LeBron, Luka, the first one doing this. So this is not like completely new. Magic Johnson was doing this. But I feel like now, in this new basketball, this new positionless basketball, which is not positionless, it's just there are new positions, the size of the point guard doesn't matter. It matters more what he can do when he gets the ball. So I call it primary ball handler. What are the keys to be a good primary ball handler? Passing ability, number one key, most important, to have good vision, see the court, and pass and get your teammates involved, of course. Second key, I would say, is being able to score from the 3-point line. This is very important, so defense cannot sack off from you. They have to be close to you, and that way you can generate more opportunities for your teammates. And why it's important is 3-point scoring, because if you are good scoring near the rim, that's good, that's very good. But that's better if you want to score yourself. It's not as useful to create for others, I feel like. And I see players like that. For example, Shea is an example of this, that he's amazing at scoring himself. And he's not a bad 3-point shooter, but he's not a specialist from 3. And yeah, I feel like this is not the role of the primary ball handler. Another key ability, and it's harder to define this one, is reading the game and pushing or slowing the pace of the game. In my opinion, offense is always better when it's in transition, when it's like a quicker pace, not letting the defense settle. And I think passing here, kicking it off quickly and passing the ball early from the rebound or from after the basket, I think that has a huge impact on that. Like starting the offense early, letting it go the ball, and running the lanes, yes. And I actually see out of players dribbling way too much. I see out of players that are just trying to make the perfect pass, trying to create like a perfect, clear opportunity for the teammate to shoot by himself. But I think sometimes it's the simpler and quicker pass, it's better because it just creates a different scenario, right? Like you don't have to do everything as the point guard, as the primary ball handler. You don't need to, get by your man and then kick it out to the wide open guy. That's good if you can do it, but if not, probably it's just better to just pass the ball early, move around, and see what other options open up once you move the ball. Yeah. And I think that the factor that plays here is that if you move the ball, you give the defense more chances to commit a mistake. If you're dribbling the ball, the defense is set, they know what you're going to do. If you move the ball, even if it's just like a normal pass that doesn't create anything, you don't know, because it creates a new scenario in which defense might rotate wrong, or they can commit a mistake. So you never know what's going to happen. That's why I think it's important to pass early in the possession and pass quick. Last key ability that I want to mention here for the primary ball handler, it's of course the pick and roll. The pick and roll is the base, or is one of the bases of modern NBA basketball, especially once playing like in 5-on-5 static offense. Once the defense is set, pick and roll is key, and being able to read well the pick and roll and being able to pass out of the pick and roll is very important. And I think here having size matters a lot, to be able to pass above the defense, to be able to, when the guy comes up to you, when the center switches or is in the middle, you need to be able to pass over the top. And I think that's why size matters here. And having said that, I'm gonna mention some players that I think are very good as a primary ball handler and fitting this role specifically. And I think who is very good at this? Tyrese Haliburton. Why? Well, he's very good at pushing the pace. He's probably the best pushing the pace. He's very good at kicking the offense off with a quick, pass to start a transition. He's amazing at doing that. He doesn't speculate much. If he can just not dribble and pass it up, he will do it, and it's good for the offense. And as well, he's a good threat from the 3-point line. Is he the most talented with the ball? Does he have the best bag in the league? Not at all. But he's good at passing, at pushing the pace, and at early passing, and he's also a threat from the 3-point. That's why he's a very good primary ball. Who else I have here? Trae Young. He has been the leader of assists in the last season of the NBA. He has great vision, amazing accuracy and precision in his passes, very good pick and roll player, and he's a super threat for defenses, not only because of his passing, but because of his shooting, and also he can do the float. And he has a very, very quick trigger. He can step back very quick, shoot it very quick. So I think he's another great, we can call it playmaker, but primary ball handler. I think Trae Young is a great one. Just to clarify, I'm judging players on how well they fit the mold, not how good they are as a guard in general. Who else? I need to put Luka here in the conversation. Luka probably is the best pick and roll player in the whole league. He reads very well, and he always finds the open man out of pick and roll. And his size helps him here. He's able always to, after the pick and roll, find the open guy who's usually in the corner. And that pass is not that easy, especially if you are short. That cross-court pass, you need to be able to put it above the defense, and he's able to do that. And I think he's great also at reading defenses and attacking mismatches, which is important. He's a threat from three. Also, he's a threat if the defense switches. Another guy that plays with Luka that I want to mention is LeBron James. Another example of a good primary ball handler, especially as well from the pick and roll point of view. He reads very well the defense, what they are doing in general. He studies a lot the game. And I think also for him it's not that he has an amazing vision. I think for him it's more that he has an amazing ability to pass because of his athletic ability. A lot of players, maybe they could see the same as he does, but they are not able physically to do the passes that he does. He's able with his strength, his size, his how quick he is. He can do some passes that for some players are not available. So that's why he's also a good example of a good primary ball handler. And last player I want to mention is actually the beard, James Harden. I think this guy might be the player who best understands his teammates. He's always reading his teammates. He knows who is hot and who is not. He knows where they want the ball, and he's always very clear about that. Always calm and collected, for sure. Still a threat from the three and the step back. Only downside of Harden, in my opinion, is that he loves too much to play slow. He slows it down way too much, let's slow it down and I will give you the pass, whatever you want it. But I think there is a downside to that, is that if you don't play quick, you might miss some opportunities that are only there if you play fast. That's the only downside. Still, I think he's a great primary ball handler. And now I want to mention players that even though they're amazing, they are like ones in their teams, they play as guards, they don't fit this mold of primary ball handler or playmaker. And for example, I said Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's a good example of a great, probably one of the best players in the league that does not fit this mold. Jalen Brunson, I think, is another example, playing the point guard, but mostly a scorer. He's not quick enough or athletic enough to push the pace or to do certain passes, so he's mostly a scorer. Who else? Similarly, Damian Lillard, I think, is another example of a guy who is great player, but more as a finalizer than a creator for others. He's not great at running the offense, I think. And another example, probably the best actually pure one on the league, is probably Stephen Curry. Why? Not because he's good with the ball, but he's probably better off ball, more than him being the primary ball handler. It's better when he's off ball, and Draymond Green does the duties of primary ball handler, actually. So he's a good example of how the basketball has changed in the way that he's not the point guard. The point guard is Draymond Green. He's not the pure point guard. He's not the ball handler. So yeah. And now I move on to the second of the positions that I want to mention. It's probably the most said or talked about position or role in the NBA since the last 10 years, and it's the 3-and-D. Everyone is talking about 3-and-D. Again, probably the first guys that were pure 3-and-Ds played in these Houston Rockets of this James Harden, that were they were utilizing Warriors style, but to the extreme. And yeah, good 3-and-D players, they need to literally shoot threes at a good percentage, especially corner threes, because those are usually the threes that defense or the weakest spot for defenses, corners. So they need to be good at shooting corner threes. And they need to be good at defending. That's it. They need to be athletic, have some size, usually the best ones, so they can defend guards or forwards. That's key for the 3-and-D player. And catch and shoot. Yeah, catch and shoot, of course. So yeah. And talking about the Rockets, one of the first players that we saw doing this were there. Trevor Ariza is a good example. Robert Covington is another great example. And another great example is PJ Tucker. PJ Tucker, a guy who actually is not that good at basketball, but he's very good at his specific role, which was defense, one-on-one defense, and corner threes, who was a specialist in that. And don't make PJ Tucker put the ball in the ground because he's not good at dribbling. He's not good at finishing. He's not good at passing, but he does threes and defense. And this comes back to what I was saying before, that you can be a bad player, but if you are a bad player that is very good at a specific role, you might have an important role in your team. And that's the truth. PJ Tucker is an example of that. PJ Tucker, depending on the context, not now, I'm talking about PJ Tucker a few years ago. Depending on the context, PJ Tucker could be bench warmer to be playing 40 minutes. It just depends who you have in the court and who or what do you need from him. If you ask him to create for others, put the ball in the ground, etc., he's not your guy. He's not your guy, not at all. There's like almost everyone else in the NBA is better at that. But if you just ask him to play defense and shoot, that's your guy. And that comes back to the example that I said, that you can be a bad player but play a lot in the NBA. Who else? I'm going to talk about current good 3-and-D players. I was thinking a bit of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Not at their prime defensively now, but they were good examples of 3-and-D players. What else? A guy that I saw in this past playoff that surprised me and that keeps surprising people is Nicolas Batum. Batum, he shot 43% from threes last season, and he's able to defend at good level, very good level, multiple positions. He's a specialist. He's rough. He can play, like I said, guards or bigs, even bigs. He was playing some defense in Jokic. And you want him in the court because he's good at knocking down threes. And he actually took over the position of Jones Jr., Derrick Jones Jr., because Derrick Jones is better defender than him, but he could not make the open shots. That's why Nicolas Batum was playing. Who else? Another specialist, 3-and-D specialist, Aaron Nesmith. I think this guy is another perfect example. Tough, a pest in defense, great shooter in offense. 43% as well from three. Who else? Dort, Luguentz Dort. Even though he did not start as a 3-and-D guy, he was only D at the beginning. He could only play defense. He was not a good shooter. He was shooting 30% when he entered the league. This last season, after 6 years, he's shooting 43% from three. Great evolution of his shot. And he's a key element for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Who else I want to mention as great 3-and-D players? Derrick White from the Boston Celtics. It's true that to say he's only 3-and-D is a bit like underwhelming because he does a lot more. But it's true that he's also a great player for that role. He shoots three at 38%, but with a super huge volume, 9 threes per game. And then he's also very good at playing defense, one of the best guard defenders that there is. It's true that he cannot play defense on forwards, but for guards, he's amazing. And then I had a fun pair comparison of players that are both 3-and-D. I have a pair of players that are better. So I have 2 pairs of players that play together in the same team, each pair. One pair is much better than the other, but if we talk only about this specific role, 3-and-D role, the pair that is worse is actually better at that role. And I'm talking about Tatum and Jaylen Brown, which both are good shooters and very good defenders. But then, in the other side, I have Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, they are better defenders, and they might be the same good shooters out of catch and shoot. Of course, they don't have the abilities that Tatum or Brown have overall, but fitting the role, they are great examples, OG and Mikal Bridges. The last player that I want to mention, he's a rookie. He will be a rookie this season. He's the hyped Cooper Flag. Cooper Flag, I think he could be a great example of a 3-and-D modern player. He's athletic, he's big, he can switch, he can protect the rim, he can defend multiple positions, active, high motor, and he seems like he has a good shooting mechanism. He can make shots. Let's see if he can develop into something else, into something more than just a 3-and-D. But even if he just stays like that, he will be one of the best 3-and-Ds of history, for sure, or of this era. Now, example of players that are not good at 3-and-D, even though they are good players. Durant is a good example of this. He's not anymore. great defender. He was good at protecting the rim with his size, but he was never a lockdown defender. Of course, the shooting is, one of the best in history, but not good at 3-and-D. Herbert Jones, another example of a guy who they claim to be 3-and-D, but he's not 3. He's just D. He's shooting 30% from 3. He's a great defender, long, athletic, lanky, high motor as well, but he's not a good shooter. And another player that I thought about is Dyson Daniels. Same, amazing defender, but not a good enough shooter. And talking about this, I wanted to mention one thing that I have seen. And talking, for example, about Dort, I have seen players go from good defenders to good 3-and-D players. With work, I have seen them develop a shot that is good enough, especially from catch and shoot. Now, I haven't seen the transition the other way around. I think it is very difficult, and I don't know if I will ever see this, for a player to go from a shooter to a defender and a shooter. And I think it's a matter of physical tools and physical abilities, and it's very difficult for a player to develop physically that much to become a great defender in the NBA if he's not that when he arrives to it. And yeah, that was just a thought that I had. But yeah, other way around, yes, we see it. And now I move on to the last position that I want to mention in this new era of the NBA, and it's the stretch big. The key to this player is that he can tread waters in defense as a center, or tread waters or be actually average or below average mostly, but he can rebound defensively. That's key for this player, for this role, and that he can shoot from the 3. That's what matters. That he can shoot and he can rebound. He can more or less try in defense. Usually, this player gains importance in the team depending on the context. And what I mean by that is the best player on the team is a slasher, another position that I will talk about in the future. Probably a stretch big is very important for that team. If you have a player that wants to finish, your best player is a guy who wants to finish near the rim, having a guy who can open the court, a center who can open the court, is very important. Or if you already have, for example, another non-shooter in the court, like a 4 or a 3, or a guy who cannot shoot, but you want to play him, probably you want to play next to him a guy who's stretch big and he can open the court. This profile of player, I have to say that it's a double-edged sword. Why? Because it gives you a lot in offense, but it also hurts you a lot in defense. You're going to suffer in defense, but you're going to get a lot in offense. So you need to use it wisely and use it as well. If you have a guy that is big and shoots, you need to give him the ball to shoot. If not, it's stupid to have him just there. He needs to be a threat for the defense in order to the defense to open up and give space for the others. It's true that originally, this kind of player, we haven't seen him that much. It was very difficult in history to see players, centers that were not, teams or coaches didn't want centers out in the perimeter. They wanted them in the paint, bruising and trying to get to the basket and draw fouls. And as well, the same in defense. They wanted guys who are tough and strong and, they will hold the fort down. So we didn't see this historically. But now they are very important, and probably every team wants a guy who can do this. I will say probably the first guy who was doing this was Dirk Nowitzki, although he was actually not shooting that many threes. He was shooting mostly field goals from 2 inside the 3-point line. He could have shot threes. He shot threes, but not that many. He was mid-range master mostly. And I also remember players, for example, from these Rockets, that, for example, Ryan Anderson was a good example of these Rockets, that he was opening the court a lot. Ryan Anderson, a player that is not that good, but he was good for the role, for that role. Now there is a new wave of players that many are like this. There is many players that are big and can shoot. For example, I'm going to say who I think are the best at this stretch big position in the NBA run. I think of Porzingis, 41% from 3. Like I said, can shoot from 3, can get rebounds. And he's actually better in defense than what they need for this role, but he's a good example. Brook Lopez is a fantastic example. 37% from three last season. And Brook is an interesting case because I think he arrived too early to the league. Brook Lopez didn't start shooting threes until he was 28, his 8th season in the NBA. Until then, he was shooting 0 threes per game in his first 8 seasons. And even though he was not shooting threes, he became the record holder for most points, total points, in Nets franchise history. Brook Lopez once was a one-time All-Star, but I think if you have arrived to the league 10 years later, he probably would have been like a 10 times All-Star. Because imagine his size, and imagine that instead of when he was 28, he started shooting threes, he started when he was 20. I think he would have dominated, would have been a much more important player for this era. Who else I have here? Karl Anthony Towns, the self-proclaimed best shooting big. I don't think so. I think it's still the guy behind me, Dirk. But it's a good example of a stretch big, and it's a good example of a double-edged sword, Karl Anthony Towns, because these plus playoffs, Karl Anthony Towns, he won some games for the New York Knicks in the playoffs, but at the same time, there were times that he was sat on the bench by Thibodeau because they were getting hurt too much by his defense. That's what I mean. Double-edged sword. He can help a lot in offense, but he can subtract out in defense, so you need to be wise how to use them. Another players that I have here, for example, Chet Holmgren, Victor Wembanyama, great stretch bigs, or they can play stretch big. They can do more things. And then I have a player, Miles Turner, the substitute of Brook Lopez. And then I have a player who is actually an example of how a bad player can play an important role, and it's Quentin Post from the Warriors. He's not such a good player, but in the Warriors team composition, he is very important for them. Why? Because you have already 2 non-shooters in Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler, and you cannot play another guy who's a not good shooter. They need a guy who can open the court. Quentin Post does that, and that's why he was important for the team. Even though he's not that good, he plays an important role for that team. And I think that's a bit 3 of the positions that I wanted to mention about this new NBA, the NBA of space and pace. And yeah, that's it. And now I'm going to move on to the next segment of the podcast, which is I Know What You Did. In this segment, I fly in time. I travel in time. I don't fly. I travel in time to the same week, let's say, that I'm recording this, but in history, in the NBA history. And today, we're traveling to 9 years ago, to 2016, more specifically to July 13th of 2016. Why? Because one of the NBA greatest players quietly walked away from the game in that day. That day, 13th of July 2016, Tim Duncan officially retired after 19 seasons with the San Antonio Spurs. No farewell tour, no press conference, no spotlight, just a press release and a quiet goodbye. Duncan left the league with 5 NBA championships, 2 regular season MVPs, 3 finals MVPs, and one of the most consistent legacies in basketball history. Since being drafted number 1 in 1997, the Spurs won at least 50 games in 18 of his 19 seasons. In an NBA full of loud personalities and highlight reels, Duncan was the opposite. Calm, unselfish, and very effective. July 13th, 2016 wasn't just the end of a career, it was the end of an era in the NBA. And with that, it ends the segment I Know What You Did in summer of 2016. And as well, that's gonna end up the podcast for today. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you like the new positions that I talk about. I have more, and I thought I could do more podcasts about this, about the new positions in the NBA, new roles. Please comment, like, subscribe, criticize. And I hope you're having a great summer. See you. That's all for today. Bye bye.